to decide that the things that I tried were in my life just to get high on. When I sit alone, come get a little known, but I need more than myself this time. Step from the road to the sea to the sky, and I do believe that we rely on. When I lay it on, come get to play it on, all my life to sacrifice.
But I want to close with something I wrote recently that makes a case for why addiction and recovery is the civil rights issue of our time. And I know it may be a stretch for you, so I'm gonna ask you to take that hat of open-mindedness and put it on right now. You know that spiritual principle of open-mindedness that we learned early in our recovery? Yeah, so put that on for me for a minute here and bear with me. Wikipedia says civil and political rights are a class of rights that protect individuals' freedoms from infringement by governments, social organizations, and private individuals, and which ensure one's ability to participate in the civil and political life of the society and state without discrimination or repression. The first person I ever heard refer to our cause as one of discrimination was my friend and my recovery champion, Patrick Kennedy. He spoke eloquently, and only as the son of Ted Kennedy and the nephew of JFK and RFK could. He said that the way we treat our fellow human beings who suffer from the disease of addiction and mental illness was abhorrent. He said it needed to change, and he stood up as a member of Congress and fought for parity when very few would. He said then, and I believe it still rings true today, that this is the civil rights issue of our time. He encouraged us all to tell our stories to public policymakers. Now I know that it may not feel right to you to compare our behavioral health issues to the discriminant hatred that our African American brothers and sisters have faced over a century and continue to fight to this day. It may not feel right to you to compare the fact that you couldn't access the health care services you needed when you needed them with those who suffered and died of AIDS because people shunned them and were afraid to help them. I know it may be easier to blame yourself for your addiction than to convince others that your health condition is no different than someone who suffers from heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. But make no mistake about it, it's really more of the same than it is different. So as I watched the Academy Award winning film Selma this winter, I couldn't help but compare that struggle to ours. I could also hear those words Patrick Kennedy spoke about a decade ago. This is the civil rights issue of our time. It's up to us to stand up when people don't get the care they need to find and sustain their recovery. There's something very wrong with the system when detoxification and treatment are only made available to a lucky few. It's up to us to speak up, just like the LGBT community has successfully done when someone is denied housing or educational opportunities or a job because of their health condition or recovery status. It's up to us to build a movement that ends discrimination, ill-informed policies, and prejudicial bias. These have existed far too long for far too many of us. Sure, our cause may look a little different than others in history, but it's just as important and it's just as significant. In fact, how can we ignore the fact that 350 people died yesterday from alcohol and other drugs, and 350 more will die today? That's a shocking 132,000 people last year. One person every 4 minutes. And while it's hard to measure the pain and suffering of the families that lost loved ones, or to those who are living with this illness, we know the cost to our society and to our economy is astronomical. So like every other civil rights issue and every other civil rights movement, we must educate society and stare ignorance and intolerance in the face and unapologetically challenge the status quo. It wasn't lost on me that the film Selma was released for the 50th anniversary of the events that transpired on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That struggle's been going on for a long time. In the past 5 decades, so much has been accomplished, but so much is more left to be done. And as the events in Charleston a few months ago proved, our movement is no different. It takes time to challenge social norms and realize change. Our struggle for justice and equality for people in recovery is at a tipping point, and it will require bold and courageous action. It really is up to each one of us to continue to push, to be the pebble in their shoe, as Cesar Chavez told migrant farm workers in California in the 60s. Will we turn the page in our country's history and finally face addiction? Will America do the same? It certainly won't happen by itself. We are the Voices for Recovery, visible, vocal, valuable, and we must be victorious. Thank you.